Good morning, guys. It's snowing right now, which is weird because just this Friday I was out in shorts going for a walk. So, what is going on? Anywho, enjoy the snow. Um, yeah, so what we're going to do with this assignment number 4 is we are going to work with this picture right here. This is the still life that you guys did, where you put a bunch of simple shapes together and you went ahead and did like a tracing or a little sketch of the still life. Again, if you feel like you didn't do a good enough job, you want to redo that, absolutely feel free. So what we're going to do with this is we are going to put patterns in each of these spaces. Here, here, here. So you might say that you don't have enough spaces, or if the spaces are too big, you can always break them up with more lines if you wanted to. So I'm going to actually put a couple of lines here just because I don't want this whole thing to have like one pattern across the top. So when you have this is all done in pencil. If you haven't already, I'm going to ask you guys if you can outline it in either Sharpie or some sort of pen, and then just erase all the pencil. So I have myself a Sharpie, that's completely fine. I also have one of these Sharpie pens, which is completely fine too. If you even have a water-based marker, that's completely fine as well. You just don't want a huge, really, really thick marker because it'll lose these details over here. So you're going to go ahead and outline these lines here. It's okay if these guys are going to be kind of on the thick side, but like I said, you don't want them to be overly thick. So you're literally making this look like a coloring book. So I'm gonna stop the video for a minute, finish this up. Next time you see me, it'll have all the lines laid out in Sharpie and everything's going to be erased. That is what you're going to do, step 1. Okay, so we have everything all laid out in marker. Now this marker, as I said, should be, not crazy thin, but it also should be a little on the thicker side. I'd like this to be, if you can, to be the thickest line that you're going to be making, and I'll explain why in a minute. So once you have this laid out, like I said, like a coloring book, what we're going to do is we're going to apply patterns in each one of these spaces. So I attached in the Google Classroom assignment, I have these handouts, and I just pretty much just gave you some basic lines and patterns that you can use. If you want to focus on lines, you have dotted lines, you have dashed lines, you have thick lines, thin lines, varied lines, absolutely. But you want to make sort of like a pattern. So if you go into something too scribbly like this, it might just look like a mess. So you want to keep it somewhat controlled. So these were here just for inspiration, just to kind of get an idea of some of the patterns. We're going to be working with patterns later on in the week for our next assignment, which I'm going to give out on Wednesday. So it gives you a couple of days for this. But in that assignment, we're going to be working with more intense patterns. So let's say I kind of like the zigzag over here. So I'm going to pick a spot, and with my trusty pencil, I'm going to go ahead and draw a pattern. Okay. Do it in pencil first. If you start feeling confident, you can start putting it in, something a little more permanent, like if you have thin markers, you can use thin markers. I saw some of you guys have thin markers, and you have colored pencils. Some of you guys even have paint. That's fantastic. But, and please do whatever you can, but I would like you guys to put some color on this. So even if you have just a red pen and a blue pen, you can do that. But if you have, a nice variety of markers or colored pencils, absolutely have at it. I do not want you guys going out shopping. Not at this time. No way, no need. Okay, but if you happen to find some pencils or markers hanging around. So this is pattern number 1, and you're going to fill up this space. So you can do polka dots if you want. You can do just lines. So I'm going to fill this area here in. And so once I pick a nice pattern, continuous lines, I could put that somewhere else for balance. So if you put this zigzag right next to here, It may not be a good idea, it just might be too redundant, too repetitive. If you have something like stripes and you want to use them again, as I said, put them in a couple of different spots. Rules of 3 work, so if you think about composition, if you have zigzags here and you have zigzags here, and if I asked you in class where else could you put the zigzags so they would balance here, here, and here, the answer would probably be right about here. And you can have them going in different directions too, if you'd like. And as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be lines. You might find that, you know, you want to do like a series of squares like this throughout your whole piece. That's fine. Try to have some sort of continuity to it. In other words, I wouldn't make these squares much bigger or smaller. You don't want to go, you know, something like that. It would just look a little bit too messy. So you want these patterns to be nice and consistent. Now, as far as colors go, the same thing would apply as far as balance to color. Well, for one thing, if you have only black or just one color, you can do this in just one color. Like I'm doing in pencil here, I'm going to go over this in a thinner, you know, maybe like a felt tip pen or something like that, or a ballpoint pen, and I'm just going to go over everything permanent when I'm done. You can leave this black and white. But if you have color, just be aware that if you put, let's say, blue here, again, you want to balance it out in a couple of spots. What might be kind of nice, especially if you're repeating patterns, is wherever you have the same pattern, you use the same color. So let's say that I have zigzags here, zigzags here, zigzags here, and I have, let's say, 8 colors. I can use, let's say, blue here, blue here, blue here. Wherever you see the zigzags, use blue. Same thing with this square shape, kind of looks like windows. Coloring. So you can just color it as far as just outlining spaces, like instead of these being, you know, gray lines, black lines, you can outline them in color. You can also fill in spaces if you want. But can you imagine if I colored this in with a blue marker? You wouldn't see the lines very well. So just the most important thing is being able to see the patterns. If you go with colored pencil or lightly with watercolor, that will not stand out too much against the lines. Like I said, the lines are more important. I don't want this to look like you just colored in spaces solid. I want to see these patterns. So if that means that you're just going over everything in pen, that's completely fine. All right? So you're going to continue this process, get every single space with a pattern. You can use these as guides. You can look up your own on the internet. Just don't get too into crazy patterns like, you know, a pattern here's lines and then swirls and then lines again and then zigzags and then try to keep the pattern pretty consistent and simple throughout the entire space. This is a space. This would be considered a different space. This would be considered a different space. Each banana. Now, I could decide on having all the bananas being the same pattern, or, you know, as long as they are different spaces here, you can make them different patterns. All right, so I'm going to continue this. You have 2 days on this, all right? Either later on today or maybe tomorrow I'll have this done to show you my sample, all right? So good luck, have fun, stay safe, wash your hands a lot, and we'll talk soon.